met-uh-mawr-fuh-sis. Hey there, rats and cats! Welcome back to Invisible Black Moon Musings, audio edition. This is the third of my newsletters from 2022 that I'm revisiting in audio form. So if you're interested in the last two, straight as the crow flies and drop your guard for the doppelganger, you can take a gander over on YouTube or on my coffee page. If you're new here, these are monthly new moon letters from me to you, where I dive down myriad rabbit holes and muse on what I find, and you are so very welcome in this cozy corner of the internet. To repeat the preamble for any newcomers, whilst these musings are not necessarily about the moon, I settled on writing for each new moon because it's the one we don't see. She dons her invisible cloak and reminds us that it's okay to take a moment to go into the darkness, recharge, and rebirth for another cycle. The gravitational pull is equally powerful with the new moon as for the full, so she's proof that you don't need to see her to know she's there. And regardless of whether you're pure science, spiritual, or a concoction of both, I'm sure we can all agree that this fantastical pull of energy can really pack a punch. So please take a seat, engage brain portals, and set your expectations for anything goes. When you hear the word metamorphosis, what comes to mind? The obvious answer is likely transformation, but I'm curious about any other associations that pop up in the old brain box. Kafka, Ovid, Philip Glass, moths, butterflies, the very hungry caterpillar. Shout out to the boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials. They're just a few that come to mind. I'd actually started on a different musing for this month 2 years ago, which I still haven't written, but I am coming to it. It just dropped me down a well of rabbit holes that I couldn't quite climb out of, so I decided just to leave a part of myself down there to explore, and I'll try and meet up with her for a future musing. I will, I promise. Hint? It's to do with things. That was nice and vague, wasn't it? Brilliant. Now that I've simultaneously bamboozled and vexed you, let's rumble on with the topic at hand. As an etymology enthusiast, let's start there. In this context, meta indicates change and morph refers to shape and form. So literally changing form. But my interest peaked at the different definitions. Overall, they're the same, but the order shifts between prioritizing the biological versus the supernatural, with the latter even referring quite specifically to magic and witchcraft. Even though Ovid's mammoth poetry manuscript Metamorphosis first appeared in the year 8 AD, it seems it only became recognized as a noun in the early 16th century, defined as a change of physical form, structure, or substance with the aforementioned connection to magic. It wasn't even recognized as a common scientific study until the mid-17th century, which is most likely attributed to the early and imperative work of Swiss-German artist Anna Maria Sibylla Merian, 1647 to 1717, for those interested. And here I shall digress. The incredible Merian was an artist, explorer, and scientific illustrator, and is considered one of the most important entomologists of our time. Entomology is the study of insects and their relationship to humans, the environment, and other organisms like plants, and dates back as far as Aristotle, but it didn't become a popular science until the 19th century. It was around half a century after Marian's death that her work was acknowledged, directly influencing the research at the time and resulting in several insect and plant species being named in her honor. Pause for applause, if somewhat delayed by a doltish patriarchy. As we well know, historically, being born into an artistic family was pretty much the only way women had even the slightest chance of pursuing the arts, outside of patronage. And even then, so thank goodness this was the case for Anna Maria. To quote a snippet from an article by the UK's Natural History Museum, because it's kind of quirky, at a time when insects were believed to spring forth magically from mud, waste, and plant matter, in a process known as spontaneous generation, Merian was one of the first to closely observe and record the process of insect metamorphosis. Spring forth magically. Love it. Perhaps there's even a clue there as to why this seemingly spontaneous metamorphosis was considered magic or witchcraft, and you all know I could wax lyrical on that. For now, though, I'll wrap it up on the magnificent Merian. Suffice it to say that she was a determined human who found ways to live life on her own terms, despite the world around her, bringing her own daughters into the business and even managing to have her own divorce approved to get out of a bad marriage. She sounded like quite the powerhouse, I have to say, contradicting not only contemporary ideas about insect development and metamorphosis, but also in her personal life. So what direction am I taking with this musing, I hear you ask? And a jolly good question that is, for I am easily led off the proverbial path. With that, here I go. Moths. That's where this is going. moths. One of my favourite little beings, and I'd pretty safely say is my spirit animal. Truly, they have visited me at the strangest times and in the strangest ways for years and seem to just appear right when I need them. It started years ago every time I went to the cinema. As the lights went down, one, two, then three small little moths would fly around me. They'd finally settle around 20 minutes in, but as I mostly went to the movies alone, I never thought much of it, except that the cinema must have had a minor moth problem, or they liked something I was wearing. One day, however, I went with one of my good friends, and as I began my gentle swatting ritual, with what seemed to her to be a battle with invisible beasts, she asked me what the fuck I was doing. In mime, of course, because the movie was starting, to which I laughed silently but hysterically at the realization of how ridiculous I must have seemed, and from that moment I started to wonder that this might be something a little out of the ordinary. An instance following this was when they seemed to have infested my open wardrobe, just a rod and sides, no door, open wardrobe. This was several years ago now, but back home in Australia, it lasted quite a few years. And the oddest part was that nothing was ever damaged by them. In any case, it had been going on for long enough, quite a few years, and between homes, that it led me to apprehensively call a pest specialist. I didn't want to kill them, but I was concerned that there was some kind of damage that I must have been missing. But the specialist, who had been doing this for many years, refused to believe that the moths would be contained to one space. He was convinced they'd be in the kitchen cupboards somewhere, or in rice, or in my tea, and I said to him, it's just not. And he refused to believe me on the phone. But when he saw there was zero damage or a single trace of them elsewhere in the apartment, he was equally dumbfounded. There are more stories like this which have since earned me the honourable status of moth lady amongst my friends, and it spiralled into an ongoing obsession both personally and in my artistic expression, musical and otherwise. So, let's muse on the metamorphosis of a moth as a metaphor. And yes, I purposely rearranged this sentence for our alliterative pleasure. You're welcome. Let's muse on this for how we change and shed our skins based on their evolutionary behaviour. For those of you who are never quite sure, I can tell you that moths are the cocoon weavers and butterflies are the chrysalis makers. But the wizardry bit is that they both basically dissolve into goo to transform. But more on that later. The caterpillar actually goes through several metamorphoses of its own, shedding its skin multiple times before the final transformation to divine winged beast. It grows, wiggling its way out of itself, one skin shedding at a time. Often it's a little too small for each new skin bag, so it can look like a kid dressing up in their parents' clothes. But it grows into it, as we grow into ourselves, albeit a little uncomfortably in the process. We fill up and feed on new knowledge, new experiences, good and bad, and grow from the old. Coming back to the goo. The process of metamorphosis for a moth is quite spectacular. A lot of descriptions tell us they break down entirely into this mushy state of soupdom and then miraculously become the other. But there's obviously a bit more going on than that. They do turn into goo, yes indeedy. But there are parts that don't, and they're called, wait for it, imaginal discs.
Roll up to the magical mystery tour. It's a magical sci-fi, baby!
These imaginal discs each have a specific purpose in the metamorphosis process and know what to become while the body reforms, while any remaining goo becomes yummy, yummy food. Recent studies have even shown that moths have memory from their caterpillar past life, as many memory-storing neurons may remain intact during the transformation and make new connections as the insect ages. Dr. Douglas Blackiston from Georgetown University. This discovery is pretty incredible from a philosophical and metaphorical perspective, in that despite the extensive transformation they undergo, they keep making new connections. So their brains and perhaps bodies are storing memory across the transformation phases. We all undergo several metamorphoses throughout our lives, some big, some small. What stage you're at right now, only you know. But maybe you're just eating your fill and preparing for the next morph. And with each one, we take with us what came before, building, reshaping, and more decorated with each shift. The world is so big now. There's so much choice, less time, less money for some, and therefore less opportunity to find something you genuinely engage with, that gets in the way of shedding your next skin or from achieving your next metamorphosis. For me, at least, each experience of hearing a story, reading a particular sentence or word, hearing a melody that resonates, the way a stranger looks at me and we engage, causes my next wave of metamorphosis. This feels like home. Perhaps with this new moon, we can take the opportunity for a mini metamorphosis, or several, morphing into something new, shedding another skin. Metaphorically, we have infinite opportunities to do this, and through our exhaustion and starvation for what we need next, we eat it. Eat the skin. Eat the goo. Ingesting the wealth of knowledge we've gained from recent and distant pasts, and allow ourselves to re-emerge via the imaginal discs that inherently know what to do. Cocoon thyself and trust in thine imaginal discs. See you down the next rabbit hole, Moon Muses. And here comes the post-ramble. You can't have a pre-ramble without a post-ramble. As I said in number 1 and 2, or 2 and 3 technically, or 3 and 4 technically, because this is actually number 5 from what I originally wrote. Anyway, this is all of the work that I do to get my brain ticking over for ideas that I have for art projects, music projects, all the things that combine and goo together. And as a freelancer, life can just be a little rough trying to get things to, land. Anyway, so should you have the opportunity, possibility, or just the plain old desire to support me with a donation, you can pop along to my Ko-fi page, ko-fi.com/visibelblack. Pretty sure. Anyway, I'll write it at the end. But it means that you can buy me a coffee, or 2, or 3, or 4. Anyway, you can buy me a coffee, and that will really help me to keep doing the things that I'm doing. I do plan to write new Moon Musings. At the moment, I'm returning to the ones that I have already written, and I really always had the plan to record them. So this has been really nice, actually, and they fit. So a follow, a share, a coffee or 3, and I'm stupidly grateful for all the people who've been supporting me so far. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I hope you have a wonderful new moon. It is quite a powerful one again. Yeah, I just love her, and I love you all. So, have a new moon. Good luck. Spring forth magically. Overall, they're the same. But the order shifts. Overall, they're the same. Oh my god.